Want to give a quick shout out to all my patrons. Thank you so much for the continued support. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading The Trials of Ashmount by John Palladino. This is book 1 in the Tragedy of 𝐒𝐮𝐲 series, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was just right now. For the second time in a row, I'm going to give a 4 stars. I like this book. It's good. Certainly has its faults, but man, the positives sure outweigh the negatives here and make me leaving this book with a very positive impression, and one in which will carry me on to my excitement going into the second book of this, which is going to be releasing, I think, rather soon. I have the second arc already sent to me, which means that the second book must be coming out soon. So a lot of you have not heard about this book because it doesn't have a ton of ratings on Goodreads or any of the other sites, or even less reviews. So I want to give you some background about what this book is and why I came to read it. So I typically don't read books with a very small amount of reviews. That's not some like elitist thing that I have. I have read a lot of books in my past with very lesser known books, but I've been burned by them a lot. And certainly I've been burned by bigger names as well. And it's not necessarily like an indie author thing, because there's a lot of indie authors that I love. There's a lot of indie authors with a ton of reviews, but indie authors with a very small amount of reviews, in general, I've had a very hit and miss relationship with those authors. And I've kind of told myself that, I'm not going to really get involved in those kind of books anymore. I want them to get a little more traction first, or at least just really appeal to me in one way or the other. But I'm not just going to read any book that any kind of author sends to me. So here I wind up. John Palladino is a friend of the channel. He hangs out in my Discord. If you haven't joined the Discord, it is the greatest fantasy Discord that's ever existed. Hit the link down below to come join the fun. But he's been a regular around there for a while, and I knew that he's written this book. I've seen other booktubers that have reviewed this book. And he went and sent it to me, and I didn't think much of it. I said, I'm probably not going to read it, but, feel free to send it to me. The e-book. I didn't want him to pay money out of his pocket for a book I might not read. But then I kept hearing people telling me I should read it. Most notably, I think when I finished up the 11th Cycle by 𝐒𝐮𝐲𝐻𝐿, a book that I loved. One of the things that I said I loved about this book a lot was how dark it went. Now, I love dark books. I don't love books just because they're dark. You can't just rest on that as a positive for your book and have me love it. But I do find myself really liking those books if they are at least average or better, and they have this really dark tone to it. I'm probably going to like it. And I heard multiple people say, look, Matt, if you like the 11th Cycle for that dark aspect, then you are going to love the Trials of Ashmount. And so I said, look, all right, let me read this thing. But I feel bad because, look, you know me, I'm always going to be honest with my opinions, brutally honest with my opinions. And I would hate to say really negative things about an author that I already like, but I'll do it. And it so greatly pleases me that I don't have to do this. Now, again, I do have negatives, and I'll get into them as we go on to this review, but I am very happy here. So, general plot overview here. This is an epic fantasy in a very large world with a lot of different POVs. There's 4 main POVs here. We do get some interludes here when they go into somebody else. Kind of think like a Stormlight Archive kind of thing, but they're much more infrequent, where you get some random thing going on that doesn't super tie into everything else. But you've got 4 POVs here. And that doesn't seem like a ton for an epic fantasy. That seems kind of average. But the thing with this series is all of these POVs are very disconnected. Certainly up until about the halfway point in this story, they're just 4 different stories. They have nothing to do with each other. Now, when I look at something like, when I think of a lot of POVs in a popular series, I often think of A Song of Ice and Fire. And A Song of Ice and Fire, I don't know how many POVs it has, but it's got a lot more than 4, that's for certain. But this one almost felt like it was more because of how disconnected it is. In The Song of Ice and Fire, look, you've got a lot of POVs, and they're all hanging out together. You've got a couple main things going on, but there's, a couple main storylines and maybe an offshoot or two here and there, but they get less screen time than the others. But a lot of what you read is characters that are interacting with each other. And that's just not the case here. So it feels very different. It feels very scattered in a good and bad way. In the good way, it really does a good job at bringing in this whole world to me at once, kind of just plunging me in and making me learn all about what's going on across this globe all at once without having to just kind of drip feed me in. Now on the bad, it's hard to get invested into this book right away. I didn't really start really liking this book until a little bit later on, because it was just hard. You'd get a chapter and about a character, and you wouldn't get back to them until you finished 3 more chapters, because it's just every fourth, basically. It doesn't kind of do the Robert Jordan thing where it'll do like a bunch of chapters for one POV. It'll bounce constantly. And so when you don't know these characters very well, it can be hard to remember them and to get really connected with them until you spend a lot more time with them. And so, I don't know how that could have been cleaned up, and maybe that's intentional. Maybe that's one of the things I liked about it, but it was hard to really get invested here. I don't want to go into too many details about what's going on in this book, but it's just a large-scale epic fantasy with kind of global conflict that is arising with a heavy magic overtone here. There's like one of the storylines involves a magic school. One of them involves a criminal that gets caught. One of them involves a family dynamic where they have to essentially kind of leave their family home, and a lot of tragedy along the way. But in all of these, it's dark. I mean, dark things happen in this. Fairly early on in the story, you're going to feel very uncomfortable. For me, that's a good thing. I want to feel that way because it makes the positives that will eventually happen here feel all the more earned. But you're definitely going to see a lot of those happen. So yeah, that, basic plotting, just think of, I don't want to say cookie cutter because it's not, but think of, the large scale epic fantasies with a lot of different POVs, and that's what you have here. In terms of the different characters here, it's, I feel like it's good, not great. It was like I said, it's hard to get super invested with these characters, and eventually I did, but it felt so disconnected at the beginning that it was hard for me to really fall in love with any of them. I certainly like some more than others. But yeah, something about the characterizations, just, the writing quality, and I'll talk about that in a second. It's not like this flowery prose. It's not super high level, or even really that far above average writing quality. Now, I don't mean to slam this. Above average would be, about half the people, below average half. This is kind of mid-grade writing quality. And for a first-time author, that's a wonderful sign, because all the other things were here, including the world building. And the world building, I thought, was the best part of this book by a long shot. The world is very fleshed out. I mean, it feels like I will always remember what this world is like, the different locations in it. The differences between these locations. It feels like a living, breathing world. It's the concepts here and the way that the magic works, the different characters that can get magic imbued with them, and the way that they interact with this. It's very well thought out. I mean, I love so much of the fantasy elements here that just are unique. I mean, you've got this overflowing volcano that's constantly erupting next to this awesome magic school, but it has this protective bubble over it all the time to protect them. But you have to go through these trials that involve the mountain to try to get into the school, and most of the kids die during this adventure to try to get themselves proven so they can get into school. This is cool stuff. This is fun stuff. The way that the gods are interacting with the people, and the people that have these, that are, pulling off this investiture of God's powers is fun. It's just constantly fun. I will constantly look back at this and thinking how fun of a time that I had by the time that this book really started rolling. Let's talk a little bit more about the writing quality. And I think one of my biggest problems here, even though this book is not short, what's the page length here? The page length is, I don't know, I have locations in my book, which I hate. Oh, 540. 540 pages. That feels like about average for a fantasy book. I felt like this book would have benefited by being quite a bit longer, because it would have let me spend a lot more time with the characters at the beginning to get to know them better, and to make the really tragic things that happen rather early on in this book feel more well-earned. I mean, these big things are happening, and even though they impacted me, it would have impacted me so much more if I would have got to know these characters a bit more before those moments were to happen. I mean, I don't want to go into specifics, but there's these moments of people that are kind of betraying somebody else, and the betrayal didn't feel earned. It felt like, oh, okay, I guess that person's a bad guy, and when it should have had more build-up. And you know, it's probably hard to say to a first-time author, yeah, you know, go write a 1,000-page tomb, but tomb. I don't know what the right word there is. Correct me, somebody, please. But yeah, that's one of my criticisms. This book could have been quite a bit longer. Before I forget, not to sound too jumbled, there were things here that I found very pleasant in terms of the way this book actually got put together. This book has a massive character listing right in the front of the book. Look, I love character listings. I talk about it all the time. For a fantasy series that has a lot of characters, you need a character listing. But the fatal flaw that so many authors do, especially for Kindle readers like me, is they put the character listing in the back of the book. Why is that a problem? Well, on Kindles, one of the beauties of a Kindle is that you can search for names. And when the character listing is in the front of the book, all you have to do is search for a character name, and the very first instance that name comes up is going to be the definition of who that character is. That is a beautiful system, and one that needs to be replicated by more authors. You know, the materials here, like a very high quality map here that you're able to zoom in on a Kindle. This is good stuff. This is great stuff, and I really appreciate that out of an author. One thing that I'm really hoping is in the second book, if we're going down this cool thing that authors do, is give me a refresher. Give me here's what happened in the first book. I'm hoping that's the case. John, assuming you're watching this, throw that into the second one, and you will get a lot of love from me. So, what else is there to talk about? I think I've hit all the major points here, other than saying, you know, I think you should try out this book. It's fun. It's good stuff. It's on Kindle Unlimited if you have Kindle Unlimited, which is such an easy buy. I've had Kindle Unlimited for a long time, and I've gotten great usage out of it. And especially for something like this, where you're probably not going to be able to find it in your library. Yeah, dude, pick up Kindle Unlimited. It's awesome. So, yeah, it's good stuff. Even though it doesn't have a ton of reviews, it deserves your attention if you're into stuff like, you know, Faithful and the Fallen, like kind of like A Song of Ice and Fire type stuff. This is in that vein. I wouldn't say that the quality is as high as those, but this author is growing, this author is learning, and maybe we'll see that quality kind of pick up as it goes along, and this will turn into a truly fantastic series. But as is this book, it's fun, deserves your read. It has some flaws, but most books do, and this is a good one. So I'm going to finish it off there. Thank you so much for watching this review, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Anna, Ben, Brian, CJ, Donute, Darren, Jamie, Maria, Michael Sugarman, My Book is Lit, Nev's Book Channel, Romeo Mike, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L., and Sky.